The air in the Bronx tenement was thick with the scent of stale cigarette smoke, boiling collard greens, and the faint, metallic tang of revolution. It was June 16, 1971, and the world outside was a tumultuous canvas of protest and change, a symphony of sirens and shouts that echoed even into the hushed, strained rooms of the Harlem hospital. There, Laisane Parish Crooks, later to be known to the world as Tupac Shakur, drew his first breath. His mother, Afeni Shakur, a woman forged in the crucible of the Black Panther Party, a warrior poet with eyes that held the fire of 1,000 suns and the weariness of too many battles, held him close. She had just emerged from a harrowing legal battle, acquitted on all counts in the Panther 21 trial, a testament to her unyielding spirit. This child, her son, was born into a legacy of defiance, a lineage steeped in the struggle for black liberation. His earliest memories were not of lullabies, but of hushed conversations late into the night, the rhythmic click-clack of a typewriter, and the ever-present hum of urgency. The apartment, a transient haven in a city that never slept, was a revolving door for activists, thinkers, and dreamers. Books with worn covers and underlined passages lay stacked on every available surface, their pages whispering tales of Malcolm, of Martin, of Fanon, of Eldridge. Laisane, a small boy with preternaturally sharp eyes, absorbed it all, a sponge in a sea of intense ideologies. He learned early to read the shifting moods of adults, to discern the subtle anxieties that underscored their fervent hopes. Poverty was a constant, gnawing presence, a cold draft that seeped under doors and into thin coats. The smell of cheap soap and old newspapers became as familiar as his mother's embrace. They moved often, from the Bronx to Harlem, then to various corners of New York City, each new address a temporary anchorage in a turbulent sea. Each move meant new faces, new streets, new lessons in survival. The world, as seen through his young eyes, was a place of stark contrasts, the vibrant camaraderie of the Panther community on one hand, the oppressive weight of systemic injustice on the other. His godfather, Meticulously Shakur, though often absent due to his own revolutionary activities and eventual incarceration, cast a long, influential shadow. Meticulously's image, a figure of strength and unwavering conviction, was woven into the fabric of Laisane's understanding of manhood and purpose. He was a child of the movement, his very existence a statement, a living embodiment of resilience born from struggle. The city's pulse, its raw energy and unforgiving concrete, became the rhythm of his nascent consciousness, shaping a soul that would forever oscillate between profound tenderness and unyielding defiance. He watched, he listened, he learned, the seeds of his future poetry and protest quietly germinating in the fertile, yet harsh, soil of his revolutionary upbringing. By the time he was 13, in the year 1984, the concrete canyons of New York gave way to the red brick charm of Baltimore, Maryland. This move, a search for stability and a fresh start, proved to be a pivotal shift in Laisane's young life. Afeni, ever seeking the best for her son, enrolled him in the Baltimore School for the Arts. It was here, within the hallowed, echoey halls dedicated to the pursuit of beauty and expression, that Laisane Parish Crooks began to truly find his voice, a voice that had been simmering beneath the surface, waiting for an invitation to erupt. The contrast was stark, almost jarring. Gone were the constant sirens and the palpable tension of the streets, replaced by the hushed rustle of sheet music, the rhythmic tap of dance shoes, and the vibrant scent of oil paints and theatrical grease. The school was a sanctuary, a vibrant kaleidoscope of creative energy that offered an escape from the harsh realities that still nipped at their heels. He immersed himself in acting, his natural charisma and intense emotional depth finding an immediate outlet on the stage. He devoured poetry, the intricate dance of words on a page mirroring the complex emotions that surged within him. Dance, too, became language, allowing his body to articulate what words sometimes failed to convey. It was a period of profound blossoming, a time when the raw, observant child of the Black Panthers began to sculpt himself into an artist. He thrived under the guidance of passionate teachers, their encouragement a balm to a soul that had known much hardship. The school offered not just education, but a sense of belonging, a community of like-minded spirits. It was during this time that he forged an unbreakable bond with a fellow student, Jada Pinkett Smith. Their friendship was immediate and profound, a recognition of kindred spirits. They shared dreams and vulnerabilities, late-night conversations about art and ambition, their youthful laughter echoing through the quiet corridors after school hours. Jada, with her own fierce intelligence and unwavering spirit, became a mirror, reflecting his burgeoning talent and offering a rare, unconditional understanding. He would recite his latest poems to her, his voice a low rumble, seeking her honest critique, and in return, she would share her own artistic explorations. This period was a golden interlude, a brief but potent chapter of stability and artistic freedom, where the weight of his name and his past could momentarily be set aside, allowing the pure, unadulterated joy of creation to take hold. The stage lights, warm and focused, became a spotlight on his potential, not on his struggles. He learned to channel his anger, his observations, his hopes, and his fears into performance, discovering the transformative power of art to both express and transcend. The vibrant energy of the school, the smell of rosin and old costumes, the thrill of applause, all contributed to shaping the multifaceted artist he was destined to become, providing a foundation of creative discipline that would serve him throughout his tempestuous life. The tranquility of Baltimore, however, was not destined to last. By 1988, another upheaval saw the Shakur family relocate once more, this time to the sun-drenched, yet economically stark, landscapes of Marin City, California. The move was a jarring return to the familiar struggles of poverty, a stark reminder that artistic sanctuary could be fleeting. The vibrant energy of the Baltimore School for the Arts was replaced by the harsh realities of Marin City's projects, a landscape of concrete and desperation that offered few easy paths forward. The dreams of formal artistic education were abruptly curtailed. He dropped out of high school, the pressures of survival eclipsing the pursuit of academic and artistic refinement. The streets, with their alluring yet dangerous promises, began to exert their pull. He found himself hustling, navigating the perilous tightrope between legality and necessity, his sharp mind and quick wit adapting to the demands of street survival. This period was a turbulent transition, a battle between the artist he was becoming and the circumstances that threatened to pull him under. Yet, even in this challenging environment, fate intervened. It was in Marin City that he encountered Layla Steinberg, a woman whose keen eye and compassionate heart recognized the raw, untamed genius simmering beneath his hardened exterior. Layla became more than a mentor, she was an anchor, a guiding hand in a storm. She saw beyond the street-tough facade, perceiving the poet, the thinker, the sensitive soul yearning for expression. She encouraged him to channel his experiences, his frustrations, and his observations into his poetry, providing not just a creative outlet but a lifeline. Under her tutelage, he began to refine his craft, transforming the raw emotion into articulate verses, his words becoming both a shield and a weapon. He performed at her poetry workshops, his voice, already infused with a hypnotic cadence, captivating listeners with its brutal honesty and poignant insights. This period was crucial in solidifying the duality that would define him: the street survivalist, sharp and wary, and the artistic visionary, deeply introspective and profoundly expressive. The tension between these two facets of his personality, the need to navigate the concrete jungle while simultaneously nurturing his inner world, became the fertile ground for his most powerful work. He yearned for direction, a path out of the cyclical poverty, and Layla offered a glimmer of that possibility, showing him that his words held power, that his voice could be heard beyond the confines of the projects. The scent of salt from the nearby bay, mixed with the ever-present smell of exhaust fumes and desperation, filled his nostrils, a constant reminder of his environment, yet the quiet scratch of pen on paper in Layla's home offered a different kind of solace, a promise of something more. He was frustrated, yes, but also fiercely determined, honing his raw talent, preparing for a future he could only dimly perceive, but knew, with an unwavering certainty, would be extraordinary. The year 1991 marked a significant turning point, a rapid ascent into the burgeoning world of hip-hop. Laysane Parish Crooks, now increasingly known as Tupac, found his way to the Oakland-based hip-hop group Digital Underground. He started not as a star, but as a roadie, a dancer, a tireless worker absorbing the rhythms of the music industry from its periphery. He moved with an innate grace, his energy infectious, his presence undeniable. Shock G, the visionary leader of Digital Underground, recognized something special in the young man, a charisma and raw talent that transcended his humble role. It wasn't long before Tupac's ambition and lyrical prowess earned him a spot on their track, Same Song, a moment that served as his official recording debut. The experience was electrifying, the studio environment a revelation, the microphone a conduit for the torrent of thoughts and emotions he had been channeling into his poetry. This initial exposure quickly led to a solo record deal with Interscope Records. The ink on the contract was barely dry before he began work on his debut album, Tupacalypse Now. The album was an immediate seismic shock, a raw, unfiltered blast of social commentary that hit the airwaves with the force of a battering ram. Its lyrics were not just rhymes, they were manifestos, searing indictments of police brutality, systemic poverty, and the crushing weight of racial injustice. He spoke with an urgency that resonated deeply with a generation hungry for authentic voices, articulating the frustrations and rage of the disenfranchised. The album was controversial from its very first spin, drawing both fervent praise and furious condemnation. Politicians railed against its perceived violence, while critics lauded its unflinching honesty. Tupac, energized and defiant, embraced his new platform, understanding that controversy was often the price of truth. He was not merely rapping, he was preaching, testifying, giving voice to the voiceless. The studio lights, the hum of the mixing board, the beat dropping heavy in his chest, these were the new tools of his revolution. He felt purposeful, finally able to unleash the torrent of observations and injustices he had witnessed since childhood. The smell of ozone from the equipment, the faint scent of marijuana smoke, and the pulsating bass became the soundtrack to his burgeoning fame, a fame that, even at this early stage, was inextricably linked to conflict and an unwavering commitment to speaking his truth. He was no longer just Lesane. He was Tupac, a name that would soon echo across the globe, a symbol of both artistry and rebellion. The years 1993 and 94 saw Tupac Shakur solidify his status as a major artist, a force of nature in an industry still grappling with his raw power. His second album, Strictly for My Nigaz, continued to build on the foundation laid by his debut, showcasing a broader range of his artistic capabilities while retaining his signature social consciousness. Then came Me Against the World, an album that, even then, felt like a premonition, a deeply introspective and vulnerable work that explored themes of paranoia, mortality, and the weight of public scrutiny. These albums were not just commercial successes, they were critical triumphs, cementing his reputation as a lyricist of unparalleled depth and an artist unafraid to expose his soul. He was a whirlwind of creative energy, seemingly inexhaustible, constantly writing, recording, and performing. But his ambition wasn't confined to music alone. He seamlessly transitioned into acting, bringing his intense presence to the silver screen in films like Poetic Justice, where he co-starred with Janet Jackson. The film offered a glimpse into a different facet of his artistry, showcasing his ability to embody complex characters and convey nuanced emotion. He moved between recording studios and film sets, the grind relentless, but his drive even more so. The bright lights of Hollywood, however, did not dim the spotlight of scrutiny that perpetually followed him. His outspoken lyrics, his confrontational public persona, and his unwavering commitment to challenging authority increasingly drew the attention of law enforcement and the media. Each interview, each public appearance, each lyrical barb seemed to add fuel to a growing fire of controversy. He was becoming too big, too loud, too uncontainable. The legal troubles that had plagued his family now began to ensnare him directly. Minor altercations escalated into public spectacles, his name a constant fixture in headlines that blurred the lines between his art and his personal life. He felt the weight of expectation, the burden of being a voice for so many, but also the increasing sense of being targeted. He was confident, yes, in his message and his talent, but also visionary enough to sense the storm gathering on the horizon. The relentless pace, the constant travel, the flashing cameras, the endless demands on his time and energy, it was a dizzying ascent, but one that came with an ever-present undercurrent of danger. He was both empowered by his fame and increasingly isolated by it, a supernova burning brighter and hotter, yet precariously close to an inevitable explosion. The world was watching, captivated by his rise, unaware of the tragic trajectory that was already beginning to unfold. The seeds of future conflict were being sown, quietly, insidiously, beneath the glittering surface of his burgeoning superstardom. The glittering veneer of superstardom, so recently a beacon of promise, now began to crack, revealing the grimy underbelly of public scrutiny and legal entanglement. 1994 descended upon Tupac Shakur not as a year of triumph, but as a maelstrom of mounting pressures. The vibrant energy of his performances and the undeniable power of his lyrics were increasingly overshadowed by a relentless barrage of headlines, each more damning than the last. The air around him seemed to thicken with accusation, a suffocating fog that seeped into every corner of his life. The sexual assault charge in New York City was the epicenter of this storm. The specifics of the allegations, whispered and then shouted by the media, painted a grim picture, a stark contrast to the socially conscious artist he had cultivated. Every step he took, from the sterile corridors of courtrooms to the echoing halls of his record label, was met with the blinding flash of cameras and the aggressive thrust of microphones. Reporters, a hungry pack, bayed for sound bites, for any morsel of information that could feed the insatiable public appetite for scandal. The scent of cheap cologne and stale coffee mingled with the acrid tang of desperation that clung to the air in the courthouse, a permanent fixture in his memory of that time. He felt himself caught in a vortex, his personal life and professional image colliding with devastating force, creating a sense of entrapment, an insidious isolation that began to gnaw at his soul. He sat in court, often clad in tailored suits that felt like costumes, his gaze defiant, yet his mind a churning tempest. He watched the faces of the jury, trying to decipher their thoughts, feeling the weight of their judgment before a word was even spoken. The injustice of it all, as he perceived it, was a bitter pill. He was a symbol, a lightning rod, and now, he felt, a scapegoat. The world, it seemed, wanted to define him not by his poetry or his passion, but by the most salacious details of his alleged transgressions. This relentless pressure began to fray the delicate threads of his relationships. Old friendships, once seemingly unbreakable, stretched taut, then snapped under the strain. He saw suspicion in the eyes of some, pity in others, and a chilling distance in many more. Even those within the industry, who had once championed his rise, now seemed to keep him at arm's length, wary of the toxic cloud that now followed his every move. The whispers grew louder, fueled by fear and opportunism. He began to question everyone, every glance, every casual conversation. A seed of paranoia, planted in the fertile ground of his revolutionary upbringing, nourished by the constant surveillance and legal battles, now blossomed into a full-blown, pervasive sense of betrayal. He was beleaguered, defensive, feeling unjustly targeted and profoundly misunderstood, battling an invisible enemy that seemed to manifest in every skeptical gaze and every critical headline. The city, once a canvas for his dreams, now felt like a cage, its towering buildings pressing in, its relentless noise a constant reminder of the chaos swirling around him. The cold, impersonal logic of the legal system was a stark counterpoint to the raw, emotional landscape of his art, and he found himself lost in its labyrinth, desperately searching for a way out. As November 30, 1994, dawned, New York City shivered under a thin, biting wind. The air, crisp with the promise of winter, carried an undercurrent of nervous energy that mirrored the turmoil within Tupac. Hours before his sexual assault verdict was due, a moment that would either condemn him or grant him a sliver of reprieve, he found himself drawn to Quad recording studios. It was a familiar sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the outside world could be muted by the thumping bass and the focused hum of mixing boards. He walked with a heavy heart, the weight of the impending judgment pressing down on him, yet there was a flicker of hope, an artist's instinct to create even in the face of despair. The studio building, a nondescript structure in Midtown Manhattan, offered no hint of the violence it was about to witness. The elevator ride up was quiet, the metallic scent of the cab a small detail in the larger canvas of his anxieties. He was with Stretch, a friend and collaborator, and a few others. The atmosphere inside the studio was tense but familiar, the low chatter of engineers and the faint smell of stale cigarettes. He was there to lay down a verse, to momentarily escape the legal maelstrom. But as he descended to the lobby, the illusion of safety shattered with brutal suddenness. The elevator doors slid open, revealing not the expected emptiness, but a tableau of menacing figures. The air instantly thickened, charged with an unspoken threat. Before he could fully register the danger, a blur of motion, the glint of metal, and then the deafening eruption of gunfire. 5 shots, each one a concussive shockwave, tearing through the air, tearing through his flesh. A searing pain blossomed in his groin, then his hand, his head. He crumpled, the cold, unforgiving concrete floor rising to meet him, the metallic tang of his own blood filling his nostrils. The acrid smell of gunpowder hung heavy, a bitter perfume of betrayal. Lying there, bleeding, his body racked with pain, his mind raced through a kaleidoscope of faces. He saw the figures fleeing, heard the shouts, the pounding footsteps. But more than the physical agony, it was the crushing weight of betrayal that threatened to suffocate him. He had been set up, he knew it with a chilling certainty. The faces of those he had recently grown wary of, Sean, Diddy, Combs, the Notorious B, and Stretch, who was present during the ambush, flashed through his mind, solidifying into a deep-seated conviction of their involvement or prior knowledge. This was not merely an attack, it was a declaration of war, a violent turning point that would irrevocably reshape his world. The ambulance sirens, distant at first, grew into a piercing shriek, cutting through the chaos. The blinding lights of the emergency room, the muffled voices of doctors, the sharp sting of antiseptic, it all blurred into a nightmarish sensory overload. He was traumatized, yes, but beneath the shock, a cold, hard rage began to calcify. His distrust, a seed planted long ago, now took root, blossoming into a fierce, unyielding paranoia. He spoke to the police from his hospital bed, his voice hoarse, his accusations venomous, pointing fingers at those he believed had orchestrated his demise. The East Coast-West Coast hip-hop rivalry, a simmering undercurrent of lyrical jabs and competitive bravado, had just erupted into open, bloody hostility. His resolve, once merely defiant, now hardened into an unshakable thirst for retribution. He had survived, but he was no longer the same man. The bullets had pierced his body, but the betrayal had scarred his soul, fueling a new, more aggressive persona, one forged in the fires of vengeance. The irony was brutal, almost poetic in its cruelty. Despite surviving the brutal ambush at Quad Studios, the legal system, unswayed by the violence he had endured, delivered its own crushing blow. In early 1995, the verdict on the sexual abuse charges came down, guilty. The judge's voice, a monotone drone, echoed through the hushed courtroom, each word a hammer blow. 1.5 to 4.5 years. The sentence felt like a death knell, a stark repudiation of his pleas of innocence, a final, definitive act of entrapment. The journey to Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York was a descent into a gray, monotonous existence. The cold steel of the handcuffs, the clanging of the cell doors, the rough texture of the prison blankets, the stale, recycled air, every sensory detail underscored his loss of freedom. He was no longer Tupac Shakur, the burgeoning superstar, but inmate number 95A1157. The vibrant tapestry of his life, woven with the threads of music, poetry, and activism, was abruptly replaced by the stark, uniform palette of prison life. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, each one a relentless cycle of bells, shouted commands, and the distant, echoing sounds of other incarcerated men. Yet, even within those confining walls, the paradox of his life continued to unfold. While he languished in isolation, his album, Me Against the World, released during his incarceration, began to soar. The news reached him through hushed conversations, smuggled newspapers, and the excited whispers of guards who, despite their official roles, couldn't deny the cultural phenomenon. It became a commercial and critical success, a raw, vulnerable masterpiece that resonated with millions. He was the first artist to have a #1 album while imprisoned, a bitter triumph. He listened to the radio sometimes, catching snippets of his own voice, a ghostly echo of his former self, now amplified and celebrated by the very world that had locked him away. The irony was almost unbearable. His voice, vibrant and defiant, resonated loudest from behind bars, underscoring the profound isolation of his physical confinement. His cell became a crucible for introspection. Stripped of the distractions of fame and the demands of the streets, he delved into a world of books. He devoured philosophy, history, and political theory, finding particular resonance in the writings of Niccolò Machiavelli, whose treatise on power, deception, and strategy spoke directly to his heart and spirit. He read the words, tracing them with a finger, seeing in them a blueprint for survival in a treacherous world. He wrote relentlessly, filling notebooks with poetry, lyrics, and letters, each word a defiant act of artistic survival. The scratch of his pen on paper was a constant rhythm in his cell, a testament to his unbreakable spirit. He was resigned to his circumstances, yes, but never truly defeated. He was introspective, using the solitude to refine his thoughts, to sharpen his resolve. The weight of his circumstances was immense, a crushing burden, yet he maintained his artistic spirit, knowing that his voice, though temporarily silenced in person, continued to echo through the world. The prison walls could contain his body, but they could not imprison his mind, his creativity, or his burning desire for justice and retribution. The monotony of Clinton Correctional, a gray landscape of routine and confinement, stretched on, each day an endless repetition of the one before. Tupac, though outwardly stoic, felt the gnawing ache of lost freedom, the yearning for the vibrant chaos of his former life. He continued to read, to write, to scheme, but the bars were real, the walls unyielding. Then, a ripple in the stagnant water of his prison existence. An offer arrived, delivered through the official channels, yet carrying the unmistakable scent of the streets he knew so well. It was from Marion Suge Knight Jr., the imposing, controversial CEO of Death Row Records. The message was simple, yet profound. Suge would post his $1.4 million bail. The price? A multi-album deal with Death Row. The news hit Tupac like a jolt of electricity. Freedom. The word itself was a potent, intoxicating drug. But the source of the offer, and the reputation of Death Row Records, brought a chilling awareness of the cost. Suge Knight was a figure of immense power, known for his ruthless business tactics and his iron-fisted control. Death Row was not just a label, it was a kingdom, built on ambition, talent, and a pervasive undercurrent of violence. To align himself with Suge was to step out of one cage and into another, albeit one gilded with the promise of unprecedented resources and a platform for vengeance. He considered the offer, turning it over and over in his mind during the long, silent hours in his cell. The pragmatic side of him saw the immediate liberation, the chance to reclaim his career, to finally speak his truth to the world, unedited and uncensored. He yearned for the microphone, for the stage, for the roar of the crowd. He needed resources, not just for himself, but for his family, to escape the cycle of poverty that had haunted his entire life. But the cautious part, the part that had witnessed the perils of power and the ruthlessness of the industry, whispered warnings. This was a Faustian bargain, a deal with the devil, offering freedom at a steep, perhaps ultimately fatal, price. He knew that Suge Knight would demand absolute loyalty, and that his world would become inextricably intertwined with the dangerous machinations of Death Row. Yet, the desperation for liberation outweighed the risks. The thought of more years wasted behind bars, his voice muffled, his message unheard, was unbearable. He was determined to reclaim his narrative, to confront his perceived enemies, to settle scores that burned like an open wound. The memory of the Quad Studios shooting, the betrayal, the lingering pain, it all fueled his decision. He accepted the deal. The agreement was a silent pact, a handshake across the chasm of his incarceration, signaling a dramatic, irrevocable shift in his allegiance and artistic direction. He was hopeful for liberation, yes, but also acutely aware of the dangerous path he was choosing. He would embrace this new, more aggressive path, pragmatic in his choice, yet with an underlying sense of foreboding, knowing that this decision would alter the course of his life, and perhaps its very duration. The rustle of the official papers being processed, the muted conversations of the lawyers, the cold certainty of the decision, it all marked a turning point, a step towards a freedom that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The moment of release from Clinton Correctional was a sensory explosion. The biting New York air, once a symbol of his confinement, now tasted of pure, unadulterated freedom. The clang of the prison gates closing behind him was not a finality, but a triumphant crescendo. He drew a deep breath, the scent of pine trees and damp earth a stark contrast to the recycled air of his cell. The world, vibrant and overwhelming, rushed in to meet him. He wasted no time. A private jet, arranged by Death Row, was waiting. The roar of the engines, the sensation of lifting off the ground, leaving behind the gray landscape of his incarceration, filled him with a potent mix of anticipation and fierce determination. The flight to Los Angeles was a journey not just across the country, but across the chasm of his past, towards a new, more formidable incarnation of himself. Upon arrival in Los Angeles, the warmth of the California sun was a welcome embrace, a stark contrast to the cold steel of his prison. He was immediately immersed in the opulent, yet often volatile, world of Death Row Records. The label's headquarters pulsed with an undeniable energy, a blend of raw talent, extravagant wealth, and an undercurrent of barely contained aggression. Suge Knight, a towering figure of imposing physical presence and undeniable charisma, met him. Their handshake was firm, a silent acknowledgement of the high-stakes deal they had struck. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the promise of artistic liberation and the unspoken understanding of mutual benefit. Tupac plunged headfirst into an intense, almost manic, recording period. The studio became his new sanctuary, his battleground, his confessional. He worked relentlessly, hour after hour, day after day, fueled by a potent cocktail of anger, vengeance, and a newfound sense of artistic freedom. The thumping bass, the crisp snare, the hum of the mixing board, these were the instruments of his rebirth. He poured every ounce of his pain, his paranoia, his defiance, and his dreams into the microphone. It was during this explosive creative surge that he fully embraced the persona of Makaveli, drawing inspiration from the Italian philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli, whose writings on power and strategy had resonated so deeply with him in prison. This was not just an alias, it was a philosophical declaration, a hardened shell forged in the fires of betrayal and incarceration. Makaveli was cunning, ruthless, and strategically confrontational. The double album, All Eyes on Me, took shape with astonishing speed, a testament to his prolific genius. Its lyrics were raw, aggressive, and unapologetically targeted. He openly challenged his perceived enemies, particularly those associated with Bad Boy Records, with a ferocity that left no room for ambiguity. His psychological state was a complex tapestry of emotions. Liberated from physical chains, yet bound by a burning desire for retribution. He was creatively charged, his mind a torrent of words and ideas, each one sharper, more potent than the last. He embraced his new identity with a fierce intensity, ready to confront his adversaries head-on, not just through his music, but through his very presence. The smell of new money and old grudges permeated the air at death row, a heady mix that perfectly encapsulated his new reality. He was free, yes, but this freedom came with a heavy price, a path lined with both unparalleled success and undeniable danger. The taste of vengeance, sweet and intoxicating, mingled with the lingering bitterness of betrayal, driving him forward into a future that promised both triumph and turmoil. The roar of the private jet's engines, a triumphant crescendo against the backdrop of the Los Angeles night, had barely faded when Tupac Shakur, now fully embodying the fierce spirit of Makaveli, plunged headfirst into the maelstrom of Death Row Records. The studio, a cavernous space bathed in the glow of mixing boards and digital displays, became his crucible, his confessional, and his war room. Days bled into weeks, weeks into a relentless, feverish sprint of creation. He was a man possessed, driven by the twin engines of artistic ambition and a burning, unquenchable thirst for retribution. The scent of fresh marijuana smoke mingled with the metallic tang of new studio equipment, a heady cocktail that fueled his prolific output. Every beat, every rhyme, every carefully crafted cadence was imbued with the raw emotion of his recent incarceration, the sting of betrayal, and the unyielding promise of vengeance. By late 1995 and early 1996, the fruits of this furious labor were ready to be unleashed upon the world. The double album, All Eyes on Me, was not just a collection of songs. It was a defiant roar, a declaration of intent, a landmark in hip-hop history. From the moment it hit the streets, the album became a cultural phenomenon, a multi-platinum success that solidified Tupac's commercial dominance and cultural impact. The air crackled with its energy, his voice a ubiquitous presence on radio waves, in car stereos, and booming from open windows on city streets. Tupac felt the shift, a palpable surge of power and triumph. He moved through the world with an almost regal confidence, his presence magnetic, his eyes, often shadowed by weariness, now gleaming with a fierce satisfaction. The album's success was a vindication, a thunderous answer to those who had doubted, condemned, or betrayed him. Tracks like California Love, with its sun-drenched, infectious beat and Snoop Dogg's laid-back swagger, became instant anthems, painting a vivid picture of West Coast hedonism and defiance. Yet, beneath the glossy surface of commercial triumph, the Makaveli persona, sharpened by prison and fueled by a deep-seated anger, pulsed with a confrontational energy. His lyrics, once overtly socially conscious, now frequently dipped into explicit challenges and thinly veiled threats against his rivals, particularly those associated with Bad Boy Records. The atmosphere around him was a paradox, euphoric celebration intertwined with a pervasive, simmering tension. Every public appearance was a gauntlet of flashing cameras, screaming fans, and the unspoken threat of unseen enemies. He was on top of the world, yet also increasingly isolated by the very feuds that had propelled him to this new height. The immense pressure of his superstardom, the constant demands, the ceaseless media scrutiny, and the ever-present threat of retaliation created a heavy mantle that he wore with both pride and a growing weariness. He was a king in a kingdom built on shifting sands, his throne precarious, constantly aware of the shadows lurking at the edges of his vision. The scent of expensive cigars and champagne in the exclusive clubs he frequented was often tinged with the faint, unsettling aroma of paranoia, a constant companion that whispered warnings in his ear. He felt powerful, yes, but also a target, the bullseye on his back growing larger with every hit record, every defiant interview, every perceived slight. The weight of his fame, once a liberating force, now pressed down upon him, a constant, suffocating reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. The simmering tensions that had been building since the Quad Studios shooting erupted into an open, relentless conflagration in 1996, with Tupac as its incendiary core. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry, a beast fed by lyrical jabs and territorial claims, reached its fever pitch with the release of his scathing diss track, Hit 'Em Up. The decision to record it was not impulsive, it was a calculated strike, born from months of simmering rage and a cold, hard desire to inflict maximum damage. The studio session for Hit 'Em Up was a crucible of raw emotion. The air was thick with smoke and a palpable sense of impending war. Tupac, his eyes burning with an almost manic intensity, paced the floor, his voice a low growl even before he stepped into the vocal booth. The beat, a menacing, relentless loop, seemed to throb with his own heartbeat. When he finally seized the microphone, the words flowed from him like venom, each line a meticulously aimed projectile. He didn't just rap, he spat, he snarled, he declared war. The track was a direct, unsparing assault on the Notorious B., Sean, Diddy, Combs, and others associated with Bad Boy Records, accusing them of complicity in his shooting, of stealing his style, of being frauds. The lyrical brutality left no room for interpretation, no possibility of reconciliation. Hit 'Em Up was not a song, it was a lyrical declaration of war, a point of no return. The moment the track hit the airwaves, it tore through the hip-hop community like a wildfire. The shockwaves were immediate and profound. Radio stations played it with a mix of trepidation and undeniable fascination. Fans devoured it, dissecting every line, every accusation. The song made peace between the warring factions and impossibility, cementing a bitter animosity that permeated every corner of the industry. The lyrical jabs, once confined to veiled insinuations, were now open, personal, and profoundly aggressive. Each word added fuel to an already volatile fire, igniting a furious response from the East Coast, further escalating the cycle of retaliation. Tupac, unapologetic and confrontational, felt a grim satisfaction. He was driven by a deep-seated anger, a conviction that he had been wronged and that justice, on his terms, needed to be served. He was fully committed to the battle, regardless of the consequences, his psychological state a complex blend of righteous fury and a chilling acceptance of the potential fallout. He knew he was burning bridges, cutting off any path to diplomacy, but in his mind, those bridges had already been destroyed by the bullets that had pierced his flesh. The taste of victory, however fleeting, was intoxicating, a temporary balm for the deep wounds of betrayal. The relentless rhythm of the track, the echoing taunts of his own voice, became the soundtrack to his unyielding resolve, a defiant anthem in a war he felt destined to fight to its bitter end. The world watched, captivated and horrified, as the lines between art and reality blurred into a dangerous, irreversible conflict. While Tupac raged against his external enemies, an insidious tension began to fester within the gilded walls of Death Row Records. The label, once a beacon of West Coast dominance, was slowly, imperceptibly, cracking under the weight of its own success and Suge Knight's increasingly heavy-handed management style. The opulent offices, with their polished chrome and panoramic views of Los Angeles, began to feel less like a bastion of creativity and more like a fortress under siege. The scent of expensive cologne and fine leather was often overshadowed by a palpable atmosphere of unease, hushed conversations, and a growing sense of paranoia. The first major fissure appeared with the departure of Dr. Dre. The renowned producer, a co-founder of Death Row and an architect of its signature sound, had grown increasingly dissatisfied with the label's direction. Dre, a meticulous craftsman whose artistry thrived on precision and control, found himself at odds with Suge's volatile temperament and the label's increasingly violent reputation. His departure, a quiet but seismic event, sent shockwaves through the industry and within Death Row itself. It was a stark signal that something was profoundly wrong, a warning bell that echoed through the lavish hallways. Tupac, deeply entrenched in Suge's world, observed these internal dynamics with a conflicted mind. He owed Suge his freedom, a debt that weighed heavily on him, forging a fierce sense of loyalty. Suge had given him a platform, resources, and an army to stand with him against his enemies. Yet, he was not blind to the growing darkness that enveloped the label. He saw the fear in the eyes of some employees, the forced smiles, the quiet obedience that bordered on subservience. He heard the whispers about Suge's temper, the stories of intimidation and violence that seemed to escalate with each passing week. The opulent parties, once a symbol of their triumph, now felt hollow, tinged with an undercurrent of forced revelry and unspoken tension. His psychological state was a delicate balance of conflicting emotions, gratitude and loyalty towards Suge, but also a growing wariness, a sense of unease that gnawed at him. He was observant, watching the unraveling dynamics around him, discerning the subtle shifts in power and allegiance. He found himself caught between his commitment to Suge and a dawning realization that the company's trajectory was becoming increasingly perilous. The golden cage of Death Row offered immense power and freedom from his previous struggles, but it also threatened to become a trap, its bars forged from the very loyalty he felt. The silence after Dre's departure was deafening, a vacuum that seemed to suck the creative energy out of the air, leaving behind a brittle, almost suffocating atmosphere. Tupac, ever the survivor, began to question the long-term viability of this alliance, even as he continued to outwardly project an image of unwavering unity and strength. He was a warrior, but even warriors must choose their battles wisely, and the internal battle for Death Row's soul was one he was not sure he could win, or even wished to fight. The oppressive weight of Death Row's internal struggles and the constant threat of external enemies temporarily lifted as September 7, 1996, dawned. The desert air of Las Vegas, dry and warm, offered a welcome respite, a glittering oasis of hedonism and escape. Tupac arrived with Suge Knight, the city's vibrant energy a stark contrast to the simmering tensions they had left behind in Los Angeles. The occasion was the Mike Tyson vs. Bruce Seldon boxing match at the MGM Grand, a spectacle that promised a night of raw power, celebrity glamour, and unrestrained celebration. The atmosphere inside the MGM Grand Garden Arena was electric, a cacophony of roaring crowds, flashing cameras, and the scent of expensive cigars and spilled drinks. Tupac, dressed in a striking red and black ensemble, moved through the throng like royalty, his presence commanding, his smile brilliant. He was in his element, a celebrity among celebrities, soaking in the adulation and the sheer thrill of the moment. He mingled, laughed, and embraced friends, a temporary shedding of the burdens that usually weighed him down. The fight itself was a blur of furious punches and a swift, decisive victory for Tyson, igniting a fresh wave of celebratory cheers. After the fight, the celebratory mood spilled into the opulent lobby of the MGM Grand. The cavernous space pulsed with a vibrant energy, a sea of humanity buzzing with post-fight adrenaline. As Tupac and Suge Knight made their way through the crowd, a sudden shift in the atmosphere occurred. Amidst the joyous chaos, a flicker of recognition, then a surge of anger. In the swirling mass of bodies, Tupac spotted Orlando Anderson, a known member of the Southside Compton Crips, a gang with whom Death Row had a contentious history. Anderson was allegedly involved in an earlier incident where he had robbed a Death Row associate. The transformation in Tupac was instantaneous, a chilling snap from jubilant celebrity to street enforcer. His eyes, moments before alight with mirth, hardened into a fierce, predatory stare. The street code, ingrained in him since childhood, immediately took precedence over the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas. Without a word, a silent, primal understanding passed between him and Suge. A sudden surge forward, a blur of motion. Tupac lunged, a coiled spring unleashed, throwing the first punch. Suge, ever the enforcer, joined the fray, a towering figure wading into the skirmish. The blows were swift, brutal, fueled by a mixture of old grudges and the raw, impulsive energy of the moment. The sounds of shouts, the impact of fists, the brief, violent eruption shattered the celebratory atmosphere. Security guards quickly intervened, pulling them apart, but the damage was done. The brief, casual violence was a microcosm of Tupac's life, where the lines between fame, street code, and danger blurred effortlessly, a stark reminder that even in the most glittering of settings, the streets always had a way of calling him back. He was exuberant one moment, impulsive the next, caught up in the thrill, a volatile mix of celebrity and street mentality that would prove tragically fateful. The night, however, was far from over. The adrenaline from the altercation with Orlando Anderson still thrummed beneath Tupac's skin as he and Suge Knight left the MGM Grand. The air outside was cooler now, a gentle breeze rustling through the palm trees that lined the famous Las Vegas Strip. The city lights, a dazzling tapestry of neon and incandescent glow, stretched into the infinite desert sky, promising endless possibilities, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. They settled into Suge Knight's black BMW 750i, a sleek, powerful machine that glided effortlessly along Las Vegas Boulevard. The windows were down, letting in the warm night air and the distant thrum of the city. In the front passenger seat, Tupac leaned back, a sense of triumph still lingering, mixed with the fading rush of adrenaline from the fight. Yaki Gaddafi, a member of the Outlaws and one of Tupac's closest friends, followed in a car behind them, part of their entourage. The atmosphere inside the BMW was a fleeting moment of calm, a brief lull before the storm. Tupac was laughing, perhaps recounting the altercation, or simply enjoying the moment of victory after Tyson's swift knockout. The rhythm of the city, the hum of the engine, the easy camaraderie, it all contributed to a deceptive sense of security. Then, the world tilted. The BMW stopped at a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Las Vegas Boulevard, a common pause in the endless flow of traffic. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, making the familiar surroundings feel subtly alien. The vibrant neon signs of the casinos pulsed in the periphery, their promises of fortune and fleeting pleasure momentarily forgotten. From the right, a white Cadillac, clean and anonymous, pulled silently alongside Suge's car. It was an ordinary moment, one that occurred countless times a night on the strip. But something in the way it positioned itself, the way it lingered, sent a shiver down the spine of those who would later recount the tale. Before anyone could fully register the anomaly, before any instinct could scream a warning, the passenger window of the Cadillac slid down. A sudden, brutal eruption of violence shattered the tranquility of the Las Vegas night. The air was ripped apart by the deafening crack of gunfire, a rapid, staccato series of explosions that seemed to echo endlessly. The smell of burning gunpowder, acrid and metallic, instantly filled the air, mingling with the scent of exhaust fumes and the distant perfume of the desert. Glass exploded inward, showering Tupac with glittering shards. The first bullet tore into his body, a searing, agonizing pain blossoming in his chest, then another, and another, striking his hand, his pelvis. His body convulsed, a sudden, involuntary spasm as life ebbed away with terrifying speed. He slumped back against the seat, his eyes wide with shock, grappling with the suddenness of the attack, the incomprehensible swiftness of his undoing. Suge Knight, in the driver's seat, felt the sharp sting of a bullet grazing his head, a searing pain that jolted him, but his focus remained on Tupac, who was now critically wounded, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The celebratory atmosphere of moments before was utterly annihilated, replaced by chaos, fear, and the chilling realization of a fatal ambush. The white Cadillac sped away, dissolving into the stream of traffic as quickly and silently as it had appeared, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. The world outside the BMW became a blur of flashing lights and confused shouts. The sirens, faint at first, rapidly grew louder, piercing the night with their urgent wail. Tupac lay slumped, consciousness flickering, the agonizing pain a relentless, all-consuming fire. His body, once so vibrant and defiant, now felt heavy, unresponsive, a vessel rapidly losing its life force. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth, a bitter finality. The tragic climax of a life lived on the edge had arrived, brutally, irrevocably, under the indifferent gaze of the Las Vegas neon. The Las Vegas night, moments before a vibrant tapestry of neon and possibility, had been brutally torn apart by the staccato thunder of gunfire. Now, a chilling silence, punctuated only by the distant, indifferent hum of the strip, descended upon the black BMW. Inside, the air was thick with the acrid stench of gunpowder, the metallic tang of fresh blood, and the sudden, deafening void where laughter had been. Tupac Shakur, his body convulsing, slumped against the leather seat, his eyes wide with a shock that transcended pain, grappling with the incomprehensible swiftness of his undoing. Suge Knight, grazed by a bullet, roared, a primal sound of rage and terror. He jammed his foot on the accelerator, the BMW lurching forward, a desperate escape into the chaos of traffic. The world outside became a frantic blur of flashing lights, not the celebratory sparkle of the casinos, but the urgent, strobing blues and reds of emergency vehicles. Sirens, faint at first, swelled into a piercing, disorienting shriek, cutting through the night with an almost mournful wail. The sheer, overwhelming violence of the ambush had transformed the celebratory atmosphere into a scene of utter devastation, a tableau of shattered glass and shattered lives. The ambulance ride was a blur of speed and sterile urgency. The flashing lights painted ghostly patterns on the passing buildings, a distorted final panorama of the city that had witnessed his end. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic, sweat, and a desperate, clinging hope. Paramedics worked with a frantic, practiced efficiency, their voices calm but their movements swift, a symphony of medical commands and the rhythmic hiss of oxygen. Tupac, fading in and out of consciousness, felt the cold press of instruments against his skin, the distant murmur of voices, the agonizing burn of his wounds. Each breath was a struggle, a shallow gasp against the tide pulling him under. His mind, even in its haze, registered the profound unfairness, the brutal finality of it all. He was being stolen from the world, from his art, from his vengeance, in the most violent way imaginable. The University Medical Center of Southern Nevada was a stark, fluorescent-lit labyrinth. The emergency room doors burst open, revealing a whirlwind of white coats and frantic activity. Gurneys clattered, nurses barked orders, and the air buzzed with an almost palpable tension. Tupac was rushed into surgery, a desperate race against time. The operating room, a sterile theater of life and death, became the focal point of a collective, desperate prayer. Outside, in the hushed, sterile waiting areas, the first ripples of shock and grief began to spread. Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, received the call in a state of numb disbelief. The news, delivered in clipped, urgent tones, felt like a cruel echo of her past, another son caught in the crosshairs of violence. Her journey to Las Vegas was a torment of airports, sterile cabins, and the relentless ticking of the clock. Each minute felt like an hour, each hour a lifetime. When she finally arrived at UMC, her face was a mask of stoic resolve, but her eyes, deep pools of ancient wisdom and pain, betrayed the tempest raging within. The scent of disinfectant, usually clinical, now seemed to cling to her like a shroud. She walked through the brightly lit corridors, her footsteps echoing, a warrior queen marching towards her greatest battle yet. Kidada Jones, Tupac's fiancée, was already there, a fragile figure of raw grief, her face streaked with tears. She had been with him in Las Vegas, just hours before, sharing the fleeting joy of the fight, the laughter. Now, her world had collapsed into a terrifying uncertainty. She clung to the hope, a thin, desperate thread, that he would pull through, that his indomitable spirit would once again defy the odds. She remembered his touch, the warmth of his hand, the way he looked at her with a fierce, protective love. Now, he was a silent, still form behind a closed door, his life hanging by a fragile thread. For 6 agonizing days, Tupac lay on life support, a silent, unmoving figure in the intensive care unit. The room was a symphony of machines, the rhythmic beep-beep-beep of the heart monitor, the gentle hiss of the ventilator, the soft whir of pumps delivering life-sustaining fluids. Tubes snaked from his body, connecting him to a fragile web of technology. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic, the faint aroma of wilting flowers, and the unspoken fear that permeated the space. Afeni and Kidada maintained a constant vigil, their hands clasped, their eyes fixed on his still face. Afeni would sit for hours, her back ramrod straight, murmuring prayers, revolutionary slogans, and the names of ancestors, her voice a low, resonant hum. She felt the weight of history in that room, the echoes of struggles, of lives lost too soon, of injustice perpetuated. She remembered the fire in her son's eyes, the passion in his voice, the unwavering belief in his message. How could such a force be silenced? Kidada, less stoic, more openly vulnerable, would lean close, whispering words of love and encouragement into his ear, tracing the lines of his face, praying for a sign, a flicker of recognition. She held his hand, feeling the surprising warmth, a ghost of the vibrant life that still clung to him. She would recount moments from their shared life, their dreams, their plans, desperately trying to anchor him to the world of the living. Mokrim Shakur, Tupac's half-brother, and other members of the Outlaws, including Yaki Gaddafi, hovered in the waiting room, their faces etched with grief and a simmering rage. The atmosphere was one of agonizing suspense, a collective breath held, a world waiting for a miracle that seemed increasingly unlikely. Each sunrise brought a renewed, fragile hope, each sunset a deepening shadow of despair. The medical team moved with quiet efficiency, their faces impassive, offering updates in measured, clinical tones that offered little comfort. The beeping of the machines became the relentless, agonizing soundtrack to their vigil, a constant reminder of the precarious balance between life and death. Then, on the afternoon of September 13, 1996, a subtle shift in the room. The doctors' faces, usually guarded, now held a deeper, more profound solemnity. The hushed conversations grew softer, more urgent. The beep-beep-beep of the monitors, once a source of fragile reassurance, now seemed to falter, to lose its rhythm. Afeni, her revolutionary spirit battling against an encroaching despair, felt a cold certainty settle in her bones. The fight was over. Her son, a warrior from birth, had fought with every fiber of his being, but the wounds were too severe, the damage too profound. At precisely 4:43 p.m., the pronouncement came, a quiet, devastating finality. Tupac Amaru Shakur succumbed to his injuries. The machines, which had so valiantly sustained him, were gently, reverently, turned off. The sudden silence in the room was deafening, a vacuum where the hum of life support had been. A profound stillness descended, broken only by the raw, guttural cry of Kidada Jones, her world collapsing around her. She clung to his body, her tears a torrent, her heart shattered into a million pieces. The man she loved, the man who had promised her a future, was gone. Afeni, though visibly devastated, moved with a quiet dignity, her grief a deep private ocean. She approached her son, her hand gently caressing his brow, a final touch that spoke volumes of love, pride, and unbearable loss. In that moment, she made the difficult, yet deeply personal decision to cremate her son the following day. It was a choice rooted in her beliefs, a desire to release his spirit, to return him to the elements, free from the confines of a world that had so often sought to cage him. The finality of the decision, though painful, brought a strange, quiet peace, a sense of control in a situation utterly beyond her command. The news of Tupac's death ripped through the globe with the force of a seismic shockwave. Radio stations interrupted programming, television channels flashed breaking news alerts, and newspapers scrambled to print special editions. The collective gasp of disbelief and sorrow from millions of fans was almost audible, a global lament that transcended borders and languages. The music industry, already reeling from the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, plunged into a state of profound mourning and apprehension. Tributes poured in from artists, politicians, and ordinary people who had found their voice, their rage, their hope, and their pain reflected in his lyrics. The vibrant, controversial life of a cultural icon had come to an abrupt, tragic end, igniting a deep sense of loss, unfulfilled promise, and a haunting array of unanswered questions. He had become, in that instant, not just a man, but an immortalized legend, his passing transforming him into something larger than life, a symbol of everything he fought for, and everything that ultimately consumed him. The world was left to grapple with the void, forever haunted by the echoes of his voice and the chilling circumstances of his demise. In the immediate aftermath, the glittering, indifferent facade of Las Vegas gave way to the grim, methodical reality of a murder investigation. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department launched a full-scale inquiry into Tupac's killing, a swirling vortex of initial activity, flashing lights, and the urgent collection of evidence. Detectives, their faces etched with the weariness of their grim profession, descended upon the scene, meticulously combing the asphalt for shell casings, interviewing witnesses, piecing together the fragments of a shattered night. The black BMW, riddled with bullet holes, became a silent, chilling monument to the violence. Yet, despite the flurry of activity, despite the high-profile nature of the victim, the investigation quickly became mired in a murky labyrinth of conflicting leads, uncooperative witnesses, and a pervasive atmosphere of fear and obfuscation. Suge Knight, who had been driving the vehicle and witnessed the entire ambush, offered little substantive cooperation, his statements vague, his memory selective. Yaki Gaddafi, who had been in the car directly behind Suge's BMW and was a direct witness to the shooting, tragically died just 2 months later in an unrelated incident, taking his crucial testimony to the grave. The street code of silence, a formidable barrier in any gang-related crime, proved impenetrable, sealing off avenues of inquiry and cloaking potential culprits in a shroud of anonymity. The scent of bureaucracy and frustration began to replace the initial urgency, as the case slowly, inexorably, grew cold. For decades, the case remained officially unsolved, a gaping wound in the fabric of justice. This lack of resolution fueled an insatiable public appetite for answers, giving birth to a dizzying array of conspiracy theories. Some whispered of government involvement, others pointed fingers at Suge Knight himself, suggesting an internal power play within death row. The name of Sean, Diddy, Combs and Bad Boy Records re-emerged repeatedly, fanning the flames of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry long after Tupac's death. Even the most outlandish theories, positing that Tupac had faked his own death and was living in secret, found fertile ground among a public desperate for a narrative that defied such a brutal, senseless end. The internet, burgeoning in the years following his death, became a vast, echoing chamber for these theories, each one gaining traction, each one adding another layer of complexity to an already impenetrable mystery. Even as the legal machinery ground slowly, often frustratingly, forward, Tupac Shakur's artistic voice refused to be silenced. The sheer volume of material he had recorded in his final, frenzied months with Death Row Records was staggering, a testament to his prolific genius and his relentless work ethic. Less than 2 months after his death, in November 1996, the first posthumous album was released, under his newly adopted alias, the Don Illuminati, The 7-Day Theory. The album was a chilling, prophetic masterpiece, its dark, confrontational tone and haunting lyrics seeming to speak directly from beyond the grave. The Makaveli persona, fully realized, resonated with an eerie power, solidifying the myth of his strategic foresight and his profound connection to the struggles he articulated. The album was an immediate commercial triumph, selling millions, a testament to his enduring appeal and the public's insatiable hunger for his voice. The world listened, captivated and awestruck, to the spectral echo of a voice that had been silenced too soon. This was merely the beginning. Over the subsequent years, a continuous stream of posthumous releases emerged from the death row vaults and later from his estate, meticulously managed by his mother, Afeni Shakur. Albums like, Are You Still Down? In 1997, Still I Rise, in 1999, and, Until the End of Time, in 2001, continued to flood the market, each one selling millions of copies. These releases showcased the incredible depth and breadth of his unreleased material, from raw, unfinished tracks to fully produced anthems, demonstrating his astonishing versatility and his constant evolution as an artist. Fans devoured every new offering, piecing together a more complete picture of his final artistic vision. His voice, once confined to the living, now resonated with a timeless quality, allowing his message to evolve and connect with new generations who had never known him alive. The continuous resurgence of his artistic voice from beyond the grave was a powerful, almost mystical phenomenon, cementing his legendary status and proving that even death could not contain his creative spirit. The studio hum, the rhythmic beats, the raw, unfiltered emotion of his lyrics, they all continued to pour forth, a testament to a foresight and prolificacy that ensured his spirit would live on, forever transcending the physical constraints of his untimely demise. In the present day, decades after the gunshots on the Las Vegas Strip, Tupac Shakur's legacy endures, not merely as a memory, but as a living, breathing force in global culture. He stands as one of the most influential and iconic figures in hip-hop history, his impact reverberating through every facet of the genre and beyond. His music, a powerful blend of raw emotion, poetic lyricism, and unflinching social commentary, continues to inspire, provoke, and resonate. Modern artists cite him as a primary influence, his innovative flow, intricate storytelling, and fearless authenticity serving as a blueprint for generations of rappers. He elevated rap as an art form, proving its capacity for profound social critique and deeply personal introspection, bridging the gap between street poetry and mainstream appeal. His image, instantly recognizable, has become a global icon, adorning murals in distant cities, emblazoned on merchandise, and etched into the collective consciousness. His philosophies, particularly the nuanced concept of thug life, an acronym for the hate you give little infants fucks everybody, are still debated, reinterpreted, and studied in academic circles, reflecting his enduring intellectual depth and the complex layers of his persona. He transcended the boundaries of a musical artist, becoming a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of resilience, contradiction, and artistic genius. His activism, rooted in his Black Panther upbringing, remains powerfully relevant. His searing critiques of police brutality, systemic racism, and economic inequality, once dismissed by some as mere rhetoric, now echo with renewed urgency in contemporary movements for social justice. His words, written in the crucible of his own experiences, speak across time, providing a voice and a framework for understanding ongoing struggles. He was a prophet in his own time, articulating truths that remain uncomfortable but undeniably real. And then there is the enigma of his death. The unsolved nature of his murder, for so long a source of frustration and speculation, has ironically contributed to his mystique. The lingering questions, the countless theories, the perpetual search for truth all keep his name perpetually in the public consciousness, ensuring that his story is never truly finished, never fully resolved. His life and death, inextricably intertwined, serve as a testament to the complexities of genius, the perilous journey of an artist who dared to speak truth to power, and the enduring human quest for justice. The echoes of his voice, both in his music and in the cultural conversations he continues to ignite, are timeless, a perpetual source of inspiration and contemplation, forever enshrined in the pantheon of legends, proving that some voices, once heard, can never truly be silenced.